Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Uh, my name is Nadhif Athallah with my student identification number 67052022110. And I come from the class of D3 Technological Telecommunication 4403. Today I'm going to talk about Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon, or in French, Napoleon Bonaparte, or his original Italian name, Napoleone Bonaparte, by name the Corsican or the Little Caporal, with French by name Le Corse or Le Petit Caporal, born August 15, 1769 in Ajaccio, Corsica, died May 5, 1821 in St. Helena Island. A French general, a first consul from 1799 to 1804, and emperor of the French from 1804 to 1814. He is one of the most celebrated personages in history of the West. He revolutionized military organization and training, sponsored the Napoleonic Code, the prototype of later civil law codes, reorganized education, and established the long-lived concordat with the papacy. Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15, 1769 in Ajaccio on the Mediterranean island of Corsica. He was the second eighth of surviving children born to Carlo Bonaparte, lived from 1746 to 1785, a lawyer, and Letizia Romalino Bonaparte, lived from 1750 to 1836. He was the fourth child and third son of the family. He had an elder brother, Joseph, and younger siblings, Lucian, Alice, Louis, Pauline, Caroline, and Jerome. Napoleon was baptized as a Catholic under the name Napoleone. Although his parents were members of the minor Corsican nobility, the family wasn't wealthy. The year before Napoleon's birth, France acquired Corsica from the city-state of Genoa, Italy. Napoleon later adopted a French spelling of his last name. Around the time of Napoleon, around the time of Napoleon's birth, Corsica occupation by the French had drawn considerable local resistance. Carlo Bonaparte had at first supported the nationalists, siding with their leader Pascu Paoli. But after Paoli was forced to flee the island, Carlos switched his allegiance to the French. After doing so, he was appointed assessor of the judicial district of Ajaccio in 1771, a plus job that eventually enabled him to enroll to his two sons, Joseph and Napoleon, in French college the Athon. A Corsican by birth, heredity, and childhood association, Napoleon continued for some time after his arrival in continental France to regard himself as a foreigner. Yet from age 9, he was educated in French as other Frenchmen were. While the tendency to see in Napoleon a reincarnation of some 14th century Italian condottiere is an overemphasis on one aspect of his character, he did, in fact, share neither the traditions nor the prejudice of his new country. Remaining a Corsican in temperament, he was first and foremost, through both his education and his reading, a man of the 18th century. Napoleon was educated at three schools: briefly at the Athon, for 5 years at the military college of Brienne, and finally for 1 year at the military academy in Paris. It was during Napoleon's years in Paris that his father died of a stomach cancer in February 1785, leaving his family in strained circumstances. Napoleon, although not the eldest son, assumed the position of head of the family before he was 16. In September, he graduated from the military academy, ranking 42nd in a class of 58. He was made second lieutenant of artillery in the regiment of Lefebvre. a kind of training school for young artillery officers. Garrison at Valence, Napoleon continued his education, reading much, in particular, works on strategy and tactics. He also wrote Lettres sur la Corse, Letters on Corsica, in which he reveals his feeling for his native island. He went back to Corsica in September 1686 and did not rejoin his regiment until June 1788. By that time, the agitation that was to culminate in the French Revolution had already begun. A reader of Voltaire and of Rousseau, Napoleon believed that a political change was imperative. But as a career officer, he seems not to have any need for radical social reforms. In 1762, 3 years after the revolution had begun, France was declared a republic. The following year, King Louis the 15th was executed. Ultimately, this act led to the rise of Maximilien de Robespierre and what became essentially the dictatorship of the Committee of Public Safety. The years of 1793 and 1794 came to be known as the Reign of Terror, in which many as 40,000 people were killed. Eventually, the Jacobins fell from power and Robespierre was executed. In 1795, the Directory, the French revolutionary government, took control of the country, a power it would assume until 1799. At the end of 1793, the National Convention troops had taken Marseille, but were halted before Toulon, where the Royalists had called in the British force with the commander of the National Convention artillery wounded. Bonaparte got the post through the commissioner to the army. Antoine Salicetti, who was a Corsican deputy and a friend of Napoleon's family, Bonaparte was promoted to mayor in September and adjutant general in October. He received a bayonet wound on December 16, but on the next day, the British troops, rushed by his artillery, evacuated Toulon. On December 22, Bonaparte, aged 24, was promoted to a brigadier general in recognition of his decisive part in the capture of the town. Napoleon was crowned Emperor of the French on Sunday, December 2, 1804, 11 female year 13, according to the French Republican calendar, at Notre Dame de Paris in Paris. It marked the instantiation of the modern empire and was a transparently masterminded piece of modern propaganda. Napoleon wanted to establish the legitimacy of his imperial reign with its new dynasty and new nobility. To this end, he designed a new coronation ceremony unlike that of the King of French which had emphasized the king's consecration, sacral, and anointment, and was conferred by the Archbishop of Reims in Cathedral. Napoleon was a sacred ceremony held in the Great Cathedral of Notre Dame de Paris in the presence of Pope Pius the, the Seventh. Napoleon brought together various rites and customs, incorporating ceremonies of the Carolingian tradition, the ancient regime, and the French Revolution, all presented in the sumptuous luxury. On May 19, 1804, the Senate converted vested the Republican government of the French First Republic in an emperor, and preparation for a coronation followed. Napoleon's elevation to emperor was overwhelmingly approved by the French citizens in the French constitutional referendum of 1804. Among Napoleon's motivations for being crowned were to gain prestige in international royalist and Catholic circles and to lay the foundation for a future dynasty. The Napoleonic Wars were a series of European wars lasting from 1803 to Napoleon's second abdication of power in 1815. In 1803, in part to raise funds for war, France sold its North American Louisiana territory to the United States for $15 million, a transaction known as the Louisiana Purchase. Napoleon then returned to war with Britain, Russia, and Austria in 1805. The British registered an important naval victory against France at the Battle of Trafalgar, which led Napoleon to scrap his plans to invade England. Instead, he set his sights on Austria and Russia, and beat back both of militaries in Battle of Austerlitz. Other victories soon followed, allowing Napoleon to greatly expand the French Empire and paving the way for loyalists to his government to be installed in Holland, Italy, Naples, Sweden, Spain, and Westphalia. And going back to Napoleon coronation, I have a little fun fact. Ludwig van Beethoven, or just Beethoven, one of the famous composer in history, which admired Napoleon, upon hearing the news of Napoleon's coronation as Emperor of France, crossed off the Eroica Symphony first inscription to Bonaparte. The composer was intensely upset upon hearing that Napoleon became an emperor. Marriages. In 1769, Napoleon married Josephine de Beauharnais, a stylish widow 6 years his senior who had two teenage children. More than a decade later, in 1809, after Napoleon had no offspring of his own with Empress Josephine, he had their marriage annulled, so he could find a new wife and produce an heir. In 1810, he wed Mary Louise, the daughter of the Emperor of Austria. The following year, she gave birth to their son, Napoleon Francois Joseph Charles Bonaparte, who became known as Napoleon II and was given the title King of Rome. In addition to his son, with Mary Louise, Napoleon had several illegitimate children. On April 6, 1814, Napoleon was forced to abdicate power and went into exile on the island of Elba in the Mediterranean Sea of Italy. His exile did not last long, as he watched France stumble forward without him. In March 1815, Napoleon escaped the island and quickly made his way back to Paris. King Louis XVI fled, and Napoleon triumphantly returned to power. But the enthusiasm that greeted Napoleon when he resumed control of the government soon gave way to old frustration and fears about his legacy. On March 10, he returned to Paris, where he was welcomed by the cheering crowds. The new king, Louis XVI, fled, and Napoleon began what came to be known as his 100 Days campaign. Upon Napoleon returned to France, a coalition of allies, the Austrians, British, Prussians, and Russians, who considered the French emperor an enemy, began to prepare for war. Napoleon raised an army and planned to strike preemptively, defeating the Allied force one by one before they could launch a united attack against him. In June 1815, his forces invaded Belgium, where British and Prussian troops were stationed. On June 16, Napoleon's troops were defeated by the Prussians at the Battle of Ligny. However, 2 days later, on June 18, at the Battle of Waterloo, near Brussels, the French were crushed by the British with the assistance from the Prussians. In October 1815, Napoleon was exiled to the remote British island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean. He died there on May 5, 1821, at the age of 51, most likely from stomach cancer. Napoleon was buried on the island despite his request to be led to rest on the banks of the Seine. Among the French people I have loved so much, he said. In 1844, his remains were returned to French and entombed in a crypt at Les Invalides in Paris, where other French military leaders are interred. Legacy. On March 21, 1804, Napoleon instituted the Napoleonic Code, otherwise known as the French Civil Code, part of which are still in use around the world today. The Napoleonic Code forbade privileges based on birth, allowed freedom of religion, and stated that government jobs must be given to the most qualified. The terms of the code are the main basis for many other countries' civil codes throughout Europe and North America. Today, many of the current legal structures of nations that defied Napoleon are based on the concept of his civil code. Considered to be his greatest legacy, Napoleon's civil code assured the spread of the ideals of the French Revolution long after the end of his rule. But it was through the image he presented himself that the people of Europe found a symbol of a revolutionary change. There is no immortality, Napoleon said, but the memory that is left in the mind of man. Napoleon also helped the spread of the democratic and liberal ideals across Europe. It was thanks to Napoleon that the continent was reshaped from a chaotic patchwork of fragmented feudal and religious territories into an efficient, modern, and secular nation-states where the people had more power and right than before. Okay, I think that's all. I'm sorry if there's a mistake. Uh, Thank you for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.